Hi there! It's good to see you. Welcome to Arts and Crafts with Miss Kyla. That's me. I'm an artist and teacher coming to you from Southern California, and I'm so excited to get to work with you through Encore. Just a few things before we get started. Before you start any new arts and crafts project, it's important to get organized. So we want to make sure our space is okay for us to work in. You might be on the floor, at a table or a counter, or outside. Wherever you are, it's probably a good idea to cover your workspace with a tablecloth or a big piece of paper. That'll make cleanup just that much easier. For this project, you might want to use scissors, glue, or other craft supplies around your space. Make sure whatever you're using, it's okay for you to use. And if you're not sure, ask an adult. You might also find you need help cutting or gluing something, and an adult isn't available to help you right now. You can always get creative and think of another way to do what you want with your project, or you can be patient and go back to that step later. I can't wait to get started on this week's project, so let's get going. Today we'll be trying out some fun ways to weave, just like Ishel, the main character in Rainbow Weaver. For this project you'll want some tape, scissors, a paper plate, and some colorful yarn or ribbon. And don't worry if you're missing something, because I've got a few ideas on how we can be creative with what we have at home. I'm going to show you a few different ways to make a woven creation of your own. Weaving can take lots and lots of different forms, but usually means combining different materials together by tucking and tying them to make one final creation. If you're using a paper plate, take your paper plate and your scissors and start cutting triangles into the edge of the plate. Make sure to go all the way around. And your notches don't have to be perfect. In fact, it's probably better if they're all a little bit different. Once you've cut your plate into your own weird shape, go ahead and set it aside. Then you're going to get a long section of your ribbon or yarn. I'm going to cut myself a section a little bit longer than double my arms. Once you've got your section cut, you're going to take one end and use your tape to attach it to the back side of your loom. Then I'm going to take my string and start wrapping it around my plate, going through these little notches I've created to make different patterns all the way across. When you get to the end of your string, you can tuck it or tie it into the back side of your loom. And just like that, you've got a woven creation of your own. You could keep changing this with beads, feathers, more ribbon, or crayons, or anything else you can think of. But you might be saying, I don't have any rainbow yarn just lying around my house. What can I do? Here's a way to weave with just a plastic cup and some strips of paper. First, take your plastic or paper cup and use your scissors to cut strips straight down from the lid to the bottom. Make sure not to cut through the bottom though. I was able to cut about 9 or 10 equally sized strips into this cup. Now go ahead and set this aside. Then we're going to take some multicolored paper, or white paper that you've drawn on, or string, or feathers, or anything else you can think of, and we're going to cut it into thick strips. And I want a couple of different colors to make my rainbow weaving. Now what we're going to do is take our cup and use this as our loom to weave our pieces of paper through. So I'm going to carefully tuck my piece of paper in between my different sections until I've woven it all the way around my cup. I started from the outside and went inside on the next section, then in and out, all the way around the cup. Then I'm going to add my next color. It helps if you try to do the opposite of whatever you did the first time. So if my orange is coming out, my red is going to go in. You might need to use a small piece of tape to secure your pieces of paper. There are lots of ways to try weaving with the materials we have around us, and lots of ways to experiment with those materials by combining them or pulling them loose or tight and trying to see what we can really make with them. And while we're working on that, let's listen to our story for today. I'll let my assistant handle it. Quill?
Thanks, Miss Kyla. Hi there, I'm Quill, and I'm helping out Miss Kyla while she's working on crafts with you. Today's story is about a kid just like you learning to weave for the first time. Her name is Ishel, and she lives in Guatemala. This is Rainbow Weaver by Linda Elovitz Marshall. High in the mountains above Lake Atitlan, Ishel watched her mother weave thread into fabric as beautiful as a rainbow. The fabric had blues as clear as the sky, reds as bright as the flowers, and yellows as golden as the corn. "Mama," Ishel asked, "may I weave too?" Her mother shook her head. "Not now, Ishel," she answered. "This cloth is for the market. If it brings a good price, it will help pay for your school and books." In and out, Ishel's mother and neighbors wove on backstrap looms. They wove as their mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers had done before them, as Mayan women had done for more than 2,000 years. After a while, Ishel asked, "Mama, may I weave now?" Again, her mother shook her head. "Count threads with me, my love. I'll show you how we make designs." Ishel and her mother counted together. Hun, Kai, Se, Jai. With each additional color, the cloth grew longer and the design prettier. Ishel reached for some thread. "Please," she asked. "No, my love," answered her mother. "You are still too young, and there is no extra thread." Ishel crossed her arms and studied the hard-packed dirt of the yard. "I want to weave. I want to help pay for my books and school too," she thought. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she walked toward the milpa, the field where the villagers planted corn, beans, and squash. Plastic bags littered the path. Day after day, more bags were tossed from windows of passing vehicles or discarded by people returning from market. No one could use all of the bags, and there was nowhere to put them. Pushing the bags aside, Ishel gathered branches and sticks. Some of the sticks were long, and some were short. She carried the sticks and branches home, then tied them together. "What are you doing?" a neighbor asked. "Making a loom," Ishel answered. Her mother smiled. "But Ishel," she said, "we don't have any extra thread." "I know, Mama," she answered. "I won't take any." Ishel tied one end of her loom to a tree. Then she gathered tall blades of pajon grass. Sitting on the ground, Ishel joined the blades of grass together by knotting the end of one blade to the end of another until she made a long chain. Then she pushed the batten over and under, back and forth, turning the blades of grass into fabric. When the fabric was finished, it was too small to be a doormat or even a placemat. It was too scratchy to wear as a bracelet. Worst of all, it was a dull greenish white. The fabric was far too small, far too scratchy, and far too dull for anyone to buy. Ishel knew it would never sell. Disappointed, Ishel took another walk. Climbing the path villagers took to bring sheep up to the mountain, she saw a clump of black wool hanging from a branch. Ishel tucked the wool under her belt. She noticed more clumps of black and white wool dotting the grasses, sticks, and plants. Ishel gathered this wool and tucked it under her belt too. At home, Ishel turned and twisted the wool, spinning it into a long, thick strand of yarn. Then over and under, back and forth, she pushed the batten and wove the yarn into fabric. Ishel looked at what she had woven. The fabric was thick and heavy. The colors were boring. Tiny pieces of grass and dirt were stuck to the fabric. The weaving was far too thick, far too boring, and far too dirty for anyone to buy. Tears rolled down Echelle's cheek. There's no way my weaving will sell in the market, she thought. No way I can help. Wiping her tears, Echelle headed toward the milpa again. Along the way, she kicked aside a plastic bag. Red, purple, orange, green, yellow, and blue bags were everywhere. They were in the fields, drooping from the branches and clogging the roads and ditches. There were so many bags it was hard for her to walk. Angry, Echelle picked up a bag. She ripped it to shreds. Suddenly, she had an idea. Echelle gathered bag after colorful bag. She took the bags home, washed them, and hung them up to dry. Now what are you doing? Another neighbor asked. Echelle smiled. You'll see, she answered. By the next day, the bags were dry. Echelle cut each bag into long, thin strips. She tied the strips together. Sitting at her loom, Echelle pushed the batten over and under, back and forth, weaving until she had used all the strips. The fabric was short, but it was clean and colorful. It had blues as clear as the sky, reds bright as the flowers, and yellows golden as the corn. The fabric looked like a beautiful rainbow, almost as pretty as the weavings of her mother, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers before her. Wondering what else she could make with plastic bags, Echelle headed back to the milpa. As she gathered more bags, the path looked cleaner and the countryside prettier. When Echelle returned home, her mother and neighbors were waiting with colorful plastic bags. We saw what you were doing, said a neighbor. We wanted to help. And without the bags everywhere, our village looks pretty again, said another neighbor. Echelle thanked them. Then she handed the weaving to her mother and said, My first rainbow. Her mother hugged her close. It's beautiful, my love, she said. Thank you, Mama, Echelle said. But do you think it will sell? Let's take it to the market and see, said her mother. At the market the next day, Echelle and her mother watched as people walked by the stalls. Finally, a woman stopped. She picked up Echelle's weaving and asked, Did you make this? When Echelle nodded, the woman smiled. Her weaving sold, and for a very good price. Echelle beamed with happiness. Now she could help pay for her books and school, and like her mother, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers before her, Echelle had woven a rainbow. The end. Wow, what an awesome story! I love the part where Echelle used the grasses. Now, let's go check in on Miss Kyla and her weaving.
Thanks, Quill. What an awesome story. I loved how Echelle used materials that she found around herself when she didn't have any thread. It was really creative of her. While I was listening, I worked on my paper plate and cup weaving. I added some feathers to my paper plate and some fun stamps to my cup. When you're done, you might want to add something to your creation too. It's entirely up to you, so get creative and try something new. Thanks for joining me today for Arts and Crafts with Miss Kyla. That's me. Stay curious, get creative, and I'll see you next time. Bye!